This episode was originally recorded on February 3rd, 2015. To ensure you stay updated with all the latest Command Control Power episodes and never miss out on valuable insights, visit patreon.com/cmdcrlpwr. By subscribing, you'll unlock exclusive new content packed with in-depth strategies and practical tips to elevate your managed service provider practice. Don't miss this opportunity to gain greater expertise.
To follow up on the last, I think it was the last show, Jerry, you were talking about Windows like support, just like what a nightmare it is to support Windows, especially home users and, they're like, crappy old PCs at their home. And I had this experience, I said something like, the only ones we support, I think we all kind of agreed, typically the only things we deal with are like virtual machines these days. And so I installed one recently on a Yosemite machine. I installed Parallels, the latest version, and then installed Windows 7 from like a disk that I had the client order on Amazon, fully up to date, like Windows 7, I think it was like Home Professional, SP2 or something like that. And I mean, the Parallels installation went fine. The Windows installation began just fine and installed, and you're taken to like your Windows desktop. And the next step is like, well, actually I should rewind. I mean, the first step is like figure out what version of Windows you want. There's like 14 different versions, it's like Professional, Ultimate, Home Pro, like it's such a variety right there. And you have to order a disk from Amazon. Like it's already like hoops you have to jump through and decisions you have to make. Wait for the disk to arrive, yada, 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 do all that stuff. So then finally you've got a Windows desktop and you enter, I'm skipping past entering the product key. I mean, there's like, this is all stuff that we don't have to deal with on the Mac side, right? It's like, just download and install and you're done. But on Windows, it's like, 40 different steps. And then by the time you get to the Windows desktop with a brand new up-to-date CD, you've got, I think it was something like 174 updates. Yeah. I mean, that blew my mind. I was like, seriously? Are you kidding me? Like this, like what? What happened to your OS in the meantime? Like, the CD came from the factory and then like all hell broke loose and then they had to release 174 updates,
Yeah, it's pretty punishing.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the security updates. And patches, sometimes it's patches on top of patches. So you have to download one layer and then do another whole separate layer. From what I understand, and Sam may bear this out, is that all those disks are the same. It's just basically what code you feed into it to unlock whatever version of Windows 7, in your case, Joe, that you want.
That's correct. I think the only difference is you might have, if you get the disks, a 32 and a 64-bit installer. But other than that, the product key determines what version you get.
That also seems ridiculous too. It's like choosing, it's like I'm just thinking of the perspective of a normal person. They're like, how many bits do I want? I don't know. Like the most. I want the most. The most bits. Yeah, it just seems
right.
mind-boggling.
I think it's pretty safe if you're doing a fresh install these days on any Mac past 2011 to get the 64-bit version. At least that's the way I've been moving forward. The interesting thing too, of course, is Microsoft. They skipped their OS 9, which is gone. They don't have one, but with their new version of the OS 10, it's going to be free. So as long as you're running anything later than Windows 7 or later, you get the OS upgrade for free.
What an interesting change.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Right.
Except for Enterprise, they had mentioned that there is that caveat that if you, which kind of makes sense, if you're running like Windows Server or something like that, they're not going to upgrade you for free. But for a lot of the people, it will be a free upgrade.
It is an interesting difference, though, because if you think about it, Apple does it because they got you for the hardware. You're going to buy the Apple hardware to install their operating system. So, all right, no big deal. We got you for a $1,200 machine. Not the same thing with Microsoft, since many different vendors can offer a PC to sell. So it is a difference in the way they've done things, and it's not like they automatically got you for the hardware part. So I found that interesting too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is an interesting change. I was wondering if, is it any different? I guess the currently available version still is Windows 8. So, like, if I were running Windows 8 on this particular client, machine, would it have been smoother? Like, could I have downloaded Windows 8, for example? I think there was an opportunity at one point to buy that through Parallels or something. It used to be, and I don't know. I think this whole process used to be smoother, but now it just seems like it's really cumbersome for everybody.
I had an issue with Windows 8, and it could be I've only done it a couple times, but I had a problem where I purchased it directly from the Microsoft Store, downloaded it to install on VMware Fusion, and there was no installable option. And it was like, you need an already existing operating system to now install Windows 8. I'm like, how the heck am I going to do that? Right. So luckily, I actually had my copy of Windows 7 on my machine. I copied it over. I booted it up on this machine, and if you open it up in VMware, it says, did you move it or copy it? I was like, I copied it. And then I was able to run the Windows 8 installer and wipe my current version and replace it. But it was such a freaking hassle. So I know exactly what you're going through, Joe.
Yeah, it was just a lot of work. It was so many hours one night, like after hours, where I was just like, just going through this install process and then update process and repeated reboots and like, it's like my whole night is ruined for like what should be like, billable time is probably like an hour. Like I have to cap it, it's like the amount of time I was actually doing something was very limited, but it's just a ton of waiting and rebooting and just like, yeah. So,
and of course it's very hard for the client to even grok that, to wrap their head around what you're doing and why you had to. And you don't want to give them a machine that's not updated. That makes no sense.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to leave it up to them because it just won't happen. And then, yeah. So you want to do things the right way, but then you have to, you end up just kind of eating it yourself to make it right.
So just out of curiosity, was there some particular software that you needed that required Windows?
Yeah, this was a unique one for me because usually it's like what we've discussed in the past, oftentimes QuickBooks and things like that. But this one was a client that runs an animation studio, and he's got a bunch of machines that are running Snow Leopard, and he's got up-to-date software that, is like compatible with Snow Leopard. I think he's running Adobe CS3, I think, and a version of Flash Professional. That's the software in particular that the newest version, I guess, doesn't do something that he wants it to do, or it's not clear if it's like a licensing thing, cost-wise or just like feature-wise. But he wanted to be able to run a certain version of Flash Professional and yet, upgrade everything else and run the latest. So he wants to upgrade this like fleet of Macs to Yosemite, but also be able to maintain compatibility with this older version of Flash Professional. So that was the idea. So he's essentially running Windows on his Mac just to run a version of Flash that he can use to do specific client projects.
I know that issue. Well, I think I know that issue. There we had that same problem where the version of Flash wouldn't run because it kept yelling about a Java issue because it wanted Apple's Java versus the new Oracle Java. And even if we had it installed, it wouldn't work. So that sounds like familiar territory, the issue that he was having. So he just decided, you know what, I'm just going to run Windows for this particular app and be done with it kind of thing.
Yeah, essentially that's what it came down to. So it makes sense. I guess you've got a lot more, I think, I don't know, clients than I do, like a variety of clients, I think. Sounds like you deal with a lot more of this kind of stuff.
Not fun, my friend.
Next time I'm going to ask you first.
So Joe, how's your birthday bash going so far?
Oh, it's great. This is my dream come true. No, it's good. I mean, talk and shop, as always with you fellas. This is it's a good day. No, it's funny. So this afternoon I had an appointment on the calendar, and it was with one of my like oldest clients, like longest clients I've worked with for over 10 years now. Also happens to be one of the oldest age-wise as well. So very sweet client that I rarely see these much anymore in person. I do a lot of stuff remotely and stuff like that. So like as of about a week ago, I noticed this appointment popped up on my calendar. So Ashley had scheduled this appointment, and I just didn't think anything of it. I thought, this is just an appointment that came up, and here it is on my birthday, and no big deal. Just go see this client. It'll be nice to see her and stuff like that. So I booked a couple of other appointments for during the day. So I finish up all those other appointments by about 3:30, 3:45, and I'm getting ready to head to this 4:00 appointment. And Ashley says, I'm gonna walk you down. I'm gonna walk you out. And so then I'm like, okay, we'll walk out. And she goes, and surprise, it's not really an appointment. It's a social visit. We're gonna go see this client. So she actually did. She originally used this client as like a accomplice in this whole planning to like free up my afternoon. And then when I thought I was going to see this client, I brought a photo that I thought I'd show her because she's a photographer. So she shows me all of her work all the time. So I thought I'd bring a photo and share it with her. And then when Ashley saw that I was kind of like excited to see this client and bringing this photo, she actually called the client and said, so it's Joe's birthday, and I pretended he was going to see you today, and he's actually excited about seeing you. Can we come by? So we went over for like just to have tea. It was kind of fun. That was how I spent my afternoon.
Yeah, you guys are sweet. That's and for the listeners at home who are not following along here with your play cards, your game card. Joe's actually a newlywed, within the last year. So we thank you for being here, Joe. It's a little bit of a sacrifice, I would imagine, because you're in your office right now broadcasting, and it's in the evening here in the East Coast. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for saying so, Jerry. It's good to be here, in all honesty. And I did get to go have a birthday dinner, after that little visit this afternoon, and here I am. So
that's terrific.
A couple of drinks in, and hopefully I'm not slurring too badly.
I hope my people treated you well at the restaurant.
They did. They're good people. Those Valencia bucks worked quite well.
So we have a little bit of listener follow-up this week, and one of our listeners wrote in, and I believe it was Tim Nyberg, and he was asking about whether we direct clients who are looking for new purchases, whether we direct them to the Apple Store that's in our area or stores, or do we actually use it used to be the Apple Sales Web Portal, but now it's moved back to the Apple Consultants webpage, where we can deal with a sales representative from Apple directly, and there is an affiliate program in place, and so you can make a little bit of remuneration on referring the sale directly to Apple. And so he just wanted to get our feelings on the pros and the cons of both systems and whether we felt strongly about one or the other. So I'll start by just simply saying that I have used both. And in some cases, you have clients who it's very helpful for them to go to the store and to sort of kick the tires and have the salespeople sort of take them through the product line. Some of our clients are not as intimately familiar with the Apple product line as we are, and for us it's pretty cut and dry, which models we would recommend to them or which ones they would prefer. But sometimes it's really a good experience for them to actually go to the store and have a little bit of one-on-one contact with some people there. And also, if you think it's important for them to build up some sort of a relationship with the store, that's also a real strong reason to just simply direct them to the store. If they're going to be using the one-to-one service, if that's something they're going to sign up for, or if they are a small business and you think that they're going to have maybe a little bit more servicing than you would, let's say, necessarily want to be doing on a regular basis with them, where it's not huge issues that they need to have tackled, but small, minute things where they're in close proximity to the store. Sometimes it's really beneficial just to direct a small business to the store. The Apple affiliate system, it's worked out well. It certainly is profitable. I don't know exactly what the percentages are, but a lot of times these are clients who are pretty familiar with the product line and they just need a machine in fairly quickly, and they may deal with the Apple rep in person, and you just simply spec it out for them. Say, look, when they call, this is what we recommend you get, and that works out quite nicely. I recently did a server, actually not a Mac server, but a Mac Pro with a 6-core that we had the Apple sales rep call her up. She ordered up the machine, and they did the deal within about 10 minutes on the phone. So it's I think they're both beneficial. It just depends on whether the client is a right match for either one.
Do you find, the Apple Store, you can build a relationship with them and it can work out well, but I don't know if either of you guys end up working with perhaps a value-added reseller that you might be able to build a better relationship with due to turnover at the stores or anything like that. And I know we have a vendor we prefer working with on that end. That being said, sometimes clients have existing relationships with the store, and we want to keep that going and keep that whole. But there are times when it's beneficial, at least on our end, to always have a guy or two that I know I can count on and pick up the phone and ring up. Whereas at the store, I don't always get that feeling. So I'm just wondering, if you guys have any other vendors that you might prefer over the Apple Store at times.
Well, I know your company reaches out geographically, Sam, into the greater New York area, and that relationship with that vendor, I think, is someone who is in that, pardon the phrase, neck of the woods. Mm-hmm. So, but I think for me, other than me, using them as well, which would be geographically a little bit farther out, I don't think, here in the Connecticut area, there's somebody who actually matches that description.
Gotcha. Yeah, so the store would work out well for you because proximity, at least.
Sure, but I wouldn't be adverse to using, someone like, partnering with someone like your company partners with. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I haven't quite, matched up with a value-added reseller, a Apple authorized service provider or a reseller in the area at this point. But it's basically, up until now, it's been a mix of just, like you said, the store, referring clients to the store the Apple store, I should say, when they need to see something in person. So oftentimes it's like, which size MacBook do you want? Can you get by with the 11-inch MacBook Air for the ultra portability, or do you, maybe it's comparing the 13-inch Air to like the 15-inch, Retina or something like that. Where they just need to see it in person. And certainly we go to them for repairs quite a bit. But other times they just want to buy something that fits, my recommendation. And it's oftentimes easier to just buy it from, just buy it on the online store and order it customized for that particular client. So they may not need the fastest processor, but they may want the maxed out storage, or they may want the maxed out RAM, but everything else is kind of like, as it is. So oftentimes you can get a better result in the online store, configuring it and just having it shipped to you versus going to the local store and having to order or having to buy just what they have in stock, or come back again and get it when they receive it in stock, when they receive your custom order.
True. Yeah. And you make mention of something important when they need to look at it, touch it, see how it feels in their hands or whatever. That's obviously ideal to have that store nearby. At least in our area, we have a bunch of them that you can drop into, and customers can go check out the hardware before they purchase.
I think too, it's important to keep in mind that if you know that the store is a good match for a client versus them ordering through the Apple portal that we have as consultants, it does, your time is valuable too. So it doesn't really make sense for you to take them through the machinations of what machine they should choose. And it's better to just have them go and talk to an Apple salesman at the Apple store to spend that time with them rather than using your time. The clients who are asking less questions, I think, are a better match for going through the portal.
Right. Yeah. Where you can put something together, be like, I recommend this. Let's just go for it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if I think my client might want to run their own mail server, I might send them to the Apple store to talk to a rep there. Yeah, no, I mean, in all honesty, it's usually, if you send them there with specific instructions, and they can usually come out with a good result. But a lot of times, I find that I don't know, depending on who they talk to, they might get upsold on something that we just don't agree with. I've even had some really bad cases where like a client has gone in specifically to buy a Retina iMac, and this has happened in one case in particular, and they came back with a plain iMac, not a Retina iMac. And only it was like upon booting it up did we discover this is not a Retina iMac. What happened? And yeah, the client was convinced that the salesperson sold her a Retina iMac. Like, she was very clear in what she was requesting. She thought that's what she was getting. So it's one of these things where it's like there's no guarantee going into the store that they're going to get even what they wanted or what you sort of instructed them to get. So it can get tricky. And I think I think the recommendation for, like, if you can find a trusted value-added reseller, that's again somebody that you can, like a person you can refer a client to. Can go a long way versus just saying go to the store, because you never know who they're going to talk to when they get to the store.
That's very true.
But that is in fact a real compelling reason too for using the affiliate program that we have as consultants through Apple, because I mean, the times I've used it, it's been pretty seamless. They've gotten quick service. You get a check in the mail pretty quickly. So it's a win-win situation on both sides. But the other thing too is, like, sometimes if the client it does go to the store, Joe, in your case where they came back and they didn't have a Retina iMac, sometimes it's because they're looking for, sometimes the price point, it's price point driven. And sometimes they just sort of go for the lower number. I'm not saying that's the case with but it's easy to sort of muddy the water by the more tempting iMac that's less priced.
Right. I mean, in this case, the client, the price wasn't even really the concern. She knew she wanted the Retina. She was willing to pay for it. In fact, the crazy part was the total came out to be very, very similar. They like upsold her on a couple of other things like the graphics card and like certain other upgrades in the plain iMac that actually brought the price to be like very similar to almost exactly what the Retina iMac would have cost. So,
wow,
it was actually a little suspicious. I mean, not to I don't know, not to again like rant about the Apple Store, but
careful, Joe.
I know, right? It was frustrating because like I showed up for an appointment intending to install this new Retina iMac and got it out of the box, got it unpacked, and booted it up. And I'm like, this looks fuzzy. What's going on here? And then I looked at the box and it's like, it's not a Retina iMac, So it's frustrating to make the trip, like a half hour away and then back and forth and she was, of course, just like really disappointed, really annoyed. So it wasn't a good outcome. And you're right, Jerry, that is a good reason, if you want a specific configuration, you want to make sure the client, like they know what they want. You've discussed it with them as their consultant. They're convinced, they're on board. It just seems so much easier sometimes to just like put the order together online versus sending them into the store. And then you don't know what, because again, the store might sell them on what they have available, or they might just confuse the client versus what you've, already identified with them. So
sure.
See, I've gotten to the point where going back to using an outside reseller, where I not only know the guys, but it's also a relatively small business like ours. So I kind of feel like I want to give them the business. And especially just having someone, like I said, that I can easily pick up the phone and talk to, and I always know that the owner's going to be there. It's different than hoping for not an issue of turnover with the business team or any other gentleman that you've been dealing with at the Apple Store. So I'm not pushing away from the Apple Store necessarily, and I definitely have my reasons for going in there for particular clients, but I do like those just small mom and pop businesses, or even just a small business under 10 people that I can rely on and give them the money to keep them afloat. You know what I mean? Like going to your local hardware store versus Home Depot.
No, for sure. There's a lot of goodwill established not only between you and the vendor, but the client as well. So, no, I'm all for that. I mean, I would love to be able to take advantage of like one of the great places you could send a client these days, if they're in New York City, is down to TechServe. And I would even like welcome, being able to partner with them more. But, in terms of my proximity from New York City, it's just a little bit too far.
Yeah, definitely. You're up there, man.
So we had another follow-up from another listener, and their name is, Joe, you have that in front of you?
Yeah. So let's see. It was Alexis Cornelier. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Alexis asked about a tool that we've often spoken about that we use to identify basically he was asking about the general case of diagnosing a problem, which is can be a real challenge just to kind of throw software at it, but specifically diagnosing a hard drive failure or a failing hard drive. And the one I often rely on is SoftRaid. And, SoftRaid, you think about it as something that in the past, it was a great way to just, set up a mirror, versus Apple's disk utility. Apple's disk utility will set up a mirror, but it won't sort of notify you if there's a problem. If one of the drive fails, it'll just keep on, working. It won't even necessarily tell you there's a problem, give you an alert. It can do automatic rebuilds, but it has to read and write every block on the disk and takes a long time. So SoftRaid has always offered advantages over that with email notifications, much faster rebuilds, at least starting with, I think, version 4, I want to say. And certainly with version 5, SoftRaid offers now RAID 5 with all the same benefits. So SoftRaid's been a great tool for those purposes, but it also has a built-in smart status analysis tool. So when you have the SoftRaid driver loaded on your machine, this could be a machine where you're running SoftRaid drives, or just any machine where you just happen to install SoftRaid and load the driver on the system, it will automatically pull all the connected drives that report smart status. So this typically means internal drives, and it will let you know if the smart status reports some kind of impending failure. And I think I kind of assumed this based on some of the wording. I don't know if this is actually true, but there was a Google hard drive study a while back, and Backblaze has done some recently, which we'll talk about as well. But these big companies who've basically analyzed, their fleet of hard drives have reported which smart status items tend to indicate an impending failure more so than others. So for example, if a drive is like reporting lots of bad blocks, that's probably a bad sign. Or if it starts to report bad blocks all of a sudden, like they start to appear, that's a bad sign. Things like that. And I don't know what some of the other factors are, but essentially SoftRaid has built in this analysis of what those smart status readings are, and it will tell you if a drive looks like, based on that analysis, that it might fail. And it'll tell you something like, based on this smart status, it's likely to fail. It's 20 to 60 times more likely to fail in the next 3 to 6 months, something like that. So it'll give you this little warning. And for me, any kind of warning like that, where there's a threat of impending failure, that's reason enough to replace a drive. Once I suspect it might fail, that's good enough for me. I'm not going to hope for the best. I'm just going to recommend that we replace it. So that's typically the tool we rely on.
And we are going to do a show in the next several weeks just where we're going to focus on some of the tools that we use for troubleshooting, and we'll cover a little bit more in depth on how Joe uses SoftRaid. But that's a great point, Joe. Most people think that, I did use SoftRaid, but I don't use it now. And you just use it as a diagnostics tool. And that's something that they don't even really advertise, but it's a great, great tip.
Yeah, I've just got it on my little diagnostic drive. So whenever I boot a client machine to verify a disk file system or rebuild the disk directory or whatever I'm doing, run a surface scan, things like that, memory check. The first thing that happens is when I get to my desktop, SoftRaid, actually before I get to my desktop, SoftRaid will have already checked the smart status of the internal drive on that machine, and will have reported if it's failing or not. So that's right off the bat, if I get an impending failure kind of notice from SoftRaid, I probably stop right there and I don't, start to mess with the drive. I'm not going to run a full surface scan if I think the drive might fail, because reading a bunch of data from a drive might cause it to fail. I'm not going to rebuild the disk directory. I'm just going to clone it, first and foremost. So it's really a good thing to have on a diagnostics drive, because you don't even have to remember to run it. It just happens when you boot up.
Yeah, great tip. Speaking of great tips, this actually was just announced today, and we had mentioned right before the holidays that there was a great AirPlay solution if you're looking for a single speaker system that you can basically use AirPlay from your Mac to different points in your home, a really nice sounding portable sound, self-contained sound system. And there's a company by the name of Wren Sound, W-R-E-N Sound, and we recommended the AirPlay speaker. I have one here in my office, and it's just gorgeous, gorgeous sound for its size, and it's really, really nicely built. And they are actually heavily discounting these units. They're actually going to be doing a refresh of their line where it's just going to combine AirPlay and Bluetooth, and I believe Play 5, which is an Android spec, together into one unit, so they don't have separate units. So that's why these are sort of priced to go. But you can go to their website and check out the Wren Sound V5 AP AirPlay speaker. It's really, really awesome, and it's normally $399 and it's priced at $249. So that's something you might want to check out. One of the things that we've talked about from time to time, and I apologize, I understand my sound is a little bit bad this evening, so thank you for tolerating that. I'm probably doing a backup of my server as we speak right now. So.
I was going to say, I think it sounds like Jerry's backing up again.
If it gets really horrible, just let me know, and we'll see what we can do. We've got a sponsor for tonight's program, and that's the good folks at Blue Mango Learning Systems. And if you haven't had an opportunity, we've been talking about this wonderful, wonderful piece of software that, again, one of the things when we take in sponsorships, we always we certainly are familiar with all of our sponsors, but we really like to talk about things that we use ourselves and that we endorse. And so if you go to the website clarify-it.com, there's no better software you could possibly use to create basically screenshots and master with very, very little input, just beautifully hand-created documents which can contain your own company branding on it, and basically creating instructional PDFs for your clients or your customers. You can actually create Word documents. It's an extremely flexible system. It's really the easiest solution. A lot of times people, when they're trying to pass along instructions to clients, they often rely and fall back on screen recording. But I can tell you firsthand, there's nothing easier than using this piece of software for creating fast, on-the-fly documents to show a client how to set up a VPN connection, for instance, or how to connect to a network share that's being hosted on a server. There's so many different cases that I've created documents. If you are working within a specific organization and you need to customize the documents with certain amounts of the company branding on it, you could do that too. So you could create unique templates for the different clients that you work with. If in fact these documents are going to be circulated among a company and you don't want your own badging of your own company on it, but you want to have the client's badging, there's a lot of flexibility here. And you can annotate and basically your complete hands-on ease of use here is just amazing. There's no training necessary and no fussing with trying to take multiple applications using things like snapping different screenshots. You can do it all within Clarify it, and it's just absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, the best way to get started is just to visit clarify-it.com to download your free trial and just dive right in, because you'll see just how easy it is to use. But it is great for those kinds of use cases. For example, where let's say you set up an office with a new server, and maybe you want to let the sort of remote staff know, like you said, Jerry, how to connect by VPN, maybe how to set up your VPN connection, how to then connect to the server. You can basically just do this once on one machine, just, annotate your screenshots as you go with step-by-step instructions and save that as a PDF for, to be distributed to your various remote staff. And again, you can save it with a template for that particular client, so it looks like it's custom made for them. You might have the same instructions or very similar instructions for many different clients. We all have our kind of methodology of how we set up a server. Typically, it's probably the same in a lot of cases, but you can have one document that you then rebrand for various clients, and it looks really, really professional and customized. And the client looks at that and they think like you spent hours on this thing and you really like buttoned it up and really made it look really good for them, and they appreciate it and they see the value in that. And once you get to master software like this, you can just use it every day. For example, if you do point of sale like I do, you can just give your point of sale clients a cheat sheet. How to do a return, how to do a new sale, how to do a gift card sale, all the kind of typical workflows. You can just brand it with your custom branding for the particular store, and with all the screenshots in there, and they'll really appreciate that. So definitely go to clarify-it.com, clarify-it.com to download your free trial of Clarify.
14-day free trial.
Yep, and you get 15% off if you use the coupon code CCP sent me.
So it's a $29.99 app with 15% off. It's a great deal, and even if you have considered it, you can, for 14 days you can just kick the tires. So we thank them and we thank you, and you going there also helps the show by using our coupon. So we love this. We all use it, and it helps our business every single day. So we recommend it to you.
I'll jump in with something real quick, because I actually, while we were talking here, I was thinking about my past week, and just we had some snow up here in the Northeast and schedules were thrown totally screwed up. But I had a weird issue that I wanted to talk to you guys about, just totally out of the blue, and it has to do with Office 2011 and working off of a file server. So, historically speaking, opening Word documents off of a server and saving it back is not something that Office will support, and they say, well, you really should be working locally and all that stuff. But I assume we all have users that just work directly off of a NAS or a file server, right? I mean, that's not out of the ordinary. So I did some research because we had increasing crashes at one of our clients where just more and more the users, they're working off the server, a file crashes, then they can't get back into it. It's read only for them. I have to correct permissions or get them a backup. And while it was sporadic in the past, it really started to hit a lot harder recently. So I did a bunch of research. You know, you read all these different forums and all this different stuff, and I found the oddest thing on multiple forums. You can stop me if you've heard this before, but I was totally thrown by this. So Word 2011 may have sporadic issues saving to a server with the name file in it.
God, really?
How crazy and ridiculous.
Sporadic issues? That just sounds ridiculous.
So, well, someone said on one of the sites, like, Word won't save. And I'm like, well, that's not true. I got a few file servers, that are saving. But other people were saying that it may have issues if your server has the name file in it. And who doesn't? I mean, how many servers do you guys have? I know I do that have the word file server, So I spent, the last weekend, I actually changed the name of the server. I was like, what the heck? Can't really hurt that badly. I'll just reconnect users. They're less than 20 people. And over the past week, it's actually been a lot better.
Wow.
And I just can't believe that is the actual reason that this may be happening.
So this is a Mac file server, and you've just changed the name of the Bonjour name?
Yeah, we actually changed the shared name. So we turned off sharing on OS X server. We changed it from NY file server to project server, and we reshared it, reconnected all the users, and they're connected via AFP. So far, it's been a more pleasant week. And now we had some off days because of snow up here, but it was really bad for a few weeks straight. So I'm interested. I'll keep you guys posted on how it goes forward. But if that really is the fix, I'm just blown away by that.
Wow. Yeah, I've been frustrated with, well, not to go off on a tangent, but the whole concept when vendors say, well, we can't support that,
Yeah.
Like, well, we don't support using a server. Okay, well, everyone does this, so what do you mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you wish they would support it, because if they would, at least like they would identify these as issues. They would say, we will support a server, but just don't call it that. Don't call it like a file server. Just I had one recently where I deal with Lightspeed, as we all know. And I have a client connecting remotely to a Lightspeed server over VPN because they want to get in remotely and be able to like work from home and just run reports and stuff like that. And this has worked forever, just all along, no problem. We're connecting over. In this case, it's a SonicWall VPN that we did not recommend, but we've been supporting it. And we have most of our other clients are using either Zywalls or other VPN appliances to connect remotely, and that's all worked fine. In this case, the SonicWall VPN, for whatever reason, connects, but then Lightspeed gives an SSL error. So I've never seen this before. Lightspeed has never apparently seen it before, and their answer is, well, we can't support VPN. And it's like, well, I mean, then what are we supposed to do? Like,
right.
How do you get in remotely? I mean, what's your recommendation? And I get that, like, they can't support every type of VPN that's out there, but in my case, the VPN connects. I can ping the server, I can pass traffic. I have different results if I'm using the correct password versus using the wrong password. Like if I use the wrong password, it says this, it's the wrong password. If I use the right password, it gives me a weird error, an SSL error. So it's mind-boggling. But when the vendor just puts up this wall, like, well, we can't support that, it's just really frustrating. Then you're left to do like what you said, Sam, just researching, on your own, just trying everything, figuring it out.
Yeah, the first time I found that particular answer, I was like, I closed the window. I was like, that just can't be right, So I was like, that's whoever that guy is a joker. So I started looking at some more stuff and like found 3 or 4 different sites that were mentioning this. I was like, and how did I never hear of this before?
Right.
So, but anyway, like I said, I'll keep you posted. I mean, I found it interesting that these past few days were a little bit smoother, but who the heck knows?
Yeah, speaking of the how did I never hear of this before thing, you guys know about the GMT bug in iOS. This came up on the Apple ACN alumni mailing list recently, and I try to give credit to the person who brought it back to my attention because I had posted about this back in November. I had a client who was saying, this is really weird. Whenever I create an appointment on one of my iOS devices, my iPhone or my iPad, it syncs with the other devices and it shows up at the correct time on the calendar, but it shows the wrong time. It shows the wrong time and time zone translated to local time. So it's really weird. It's like all the devices are set to New York time, right? And then so they create the event and it's, in theory, just defaulting to New York time. And let's say they set it for 10 a.m., a 10 a.m. meeting on their iPhone. It shows up at 10 a.m. on the iPad, but it shows like 8 a.m. PST, for example. In their case, it's Pacific time.
Right.
And then on the Mac, it's the same deal. So it shows up on the calendar in the right time slot, but then like if you look at the time that's actually listed on the appointment, it shows the wrong time and then the wrong time zone, which makes it the right time. So it's really confusing. The users, of course, then once they're aware of it, they can just be aware of it. But then you're doing this like math in your head and stuff. And if you want to change the time, it's like, it shows 8 a.m. PST. If you want to change it to 10:30 Eastern, you've got to go to like 8 or whatever. You got to go to 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, right, to make it 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. So it's this weird issue, and I had never seen it before. So I'm researching it. I can't find any reference to it because in my user's case, it was Pacific time that it was showing. But apparently, it's a known issue in iOS up to and including 8.1.3. And they're calling it the GMT bug because I guess it affects Exchange servers. Most Exchange servers are configured, I guess, by default just to be GMT as like a default time zone, Greenwich Mean Time. In this case, the client is hosted on Intermedia, which is in California, and so their time zone is PST, and so that's how it's manifesting for them.
Right. It creates
but it's great to like then find a reference at least where it's like a sanity check. It's like, okay, I'm not. I haven't missed this issue entirely. I'm not seeing something that's totally, completely obscure. I just haven't encountered this specific incarnation of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always ongoing. I mean, the stuff that we learn and we're like, wait, how did I not know that? Or you see something that's totally mind-boggling to you. Sometimes it's unexplainable. We learn something new almost every day that we do this job.
And we could, of course, this speaks, of course, to the larger picture that we could talk another hour about, which is the self-imposed yearly renewal schedule of software that Apple has put on themselves and the public. And we are dealing with bugs, whether it's on iOS 8 or it's on the Mac OS, and, nothing really gets squashed and we just move on to the next operating system. They're not big bugs, but, they're still little tiny things. I mean, myself and my wife, we're both using iPhone 6 Pluses, and all kinds of crazy stuff, just happens, and you just reboot and, move on.
Yeah, this came up recently with, Marco Arment's post about, what do you call it? Apple has lost the functional high ground, and then there's a bunch of fallout from that. And he came on very strongly, like in this opinion that things are just really broken in the Apple ecosystem. But one, I think, really interesting takeaway from that was when you think about the number of interactions that we have, in our various systems these days, it's way different from when we started out. I always tell the story about how, like, when I started doing this for a living, people had one computer in their house, and that was it. Mm-hmm. Like some people had a BlackBerry, some people had a Palm, maybe, and it was like just very rare to have like these interactions. But now we have the interaction between the service and the software and various devices running various operating systems and various different app versions. And, we have cellular data and, wired networking and wireless network. It's like all these different various things interacting. And so when you have a small bug on one of them, it can, have repercussions across the entire ecosystem. And if you have one small bug in any one of these different things, it oftentimes means that there's this big problem for the user.
You're cracking me up, man. You're making me feel I know it's your birthday and also you're feeling a little bit older. But you're like, back when I started, people only had one computer. Didn't have the internet.
Right. Hey, when I was in high school, Google wasn't a thing, and for some.
Wow, Joe, you're really old. You're really old, Joe.
I remember like, when we like started learning about search engines, when that became a thing, and it's not that long ago. But for a while it was almost much simpler where, I don't know, where like software was stable for longer periods of time. I think that's the main takeaway the point that you're making is like with the yearly update cycle, there's never a time where things are just stable for a while, or where at least the bugs. It's like the bugs change every year.
Yeah, it is true. That annual cycle just changes things so much. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Jerry, when you said it doesn't get completed. We just move on, and that's that.
Right.
Let's just end the show right here. This is so discouraging.
Yeah, now that we're all discouraged and deflated. So one of the things that we mentioned on other shows from time to time is how we frequently really quick call from a client, or maybe it's just a random call from somebody who's potentially a new client, but it doesn't, you could already tell from the phone call or the interaction that it's not going to manifest itself in that way. And sometimes we do spend our billable time for free just advising someone that we'd never met. And sometimes we have clients that live reasonably close to our office or where we work, and we offer them maybe sometimes just sort of drop in and do something very quick for free for them. And one of the great things that you can do, and we've mentioned this on previous shows, is that you can ask them, you could tell them, well, I'm not going to charge you for this time that I'm spending with you, but if you had a few words to share, positive or negative, we'd love for you to, we'll send you a link, and you could either give a little bit of share your thoughts on Google with a review. Through the Google, you simply Google your company, and if you're listed there as a business, there's a place for folks to submit reviews, or through the Apple Consultants locator. People can submit reviews, or even through something like Yelp, and these are all indexable on Google. I think Yelp actually seems to get a lot of traffic for whatever reason, so there must be some partnering that Google does with Yelp, but also, of course, just getting a good review on Google really helps. So my little story to share is, and that's worked out really well for me from time to time. So I have a 93-year-old client who lives, maybe not more than 5 minutes away from my office. And
is this Nana?
It's not Nana. Okay, and from time to time, she might need just a bit of help, just basically rebooting her modem or something like that, or kind of getting her out of some misconfigured email situation with Apple Mail, which seems to happen to her from time to time, or an iCloud identity. So I've often gone in there and maybe spent 10 to 15 minutes or even less than that. And, I will always tell her like, oh, I'm not going to charge you this time. So I did a couple of those. And the other day I had dropped in there and I said, I'm not going to charge you, but if you'd like, I would love for you to just share a few words on the Google website, about MacWorks. And so she said she would do it. So I sent her off the email. And a few days later, this review shows up. And the review was fine. But you can rate people with stars. And, so most of the people that I've asked, just about everybody has given, as a matter of course, you get 5 stars. She wrote a few nice sentences, but she gave me 4 stars.
Ouch.
So I was like, what? And it made me laugh. Of course it didn't, hurt the average, but it was just kind of comical that,
that's funny.
You kind of expected, if you've gone in there a few times and basically not charged her at all, that you'd be getting at least 5 stars.
Yeah. What does it take to get the 5th star in her book?
Exactly.
You got to pay her.
Rough, man.
But it's a great tip. So, and of course, you're putting a little bit of goodwill out there as well.
That is a really good tip. I really like that idea of like, just ask them for something, don't make it like totally free where they're just going to abuse your goodwill. Like they're, get a little bit something in return. Hopefully the next person who's a paying client will be sent your way for that. I had one from speaking of like these referrals and just sort of non-lucrative clients. I do get referrals from the Apple Store. I have to be thankful for that. But every once in a while I get one that's just like totally off the wall. And so this person calls us from the Apple Store. And the story is something like they need to upgrade and they need more memory. So it's a MacBook Pro. And Apple said you need more memory to go to Yosemite. So the guy said, Apple says I need more memory. They said I can get 8 gigs, and do you guys do that? And we said, yeah, we do this all the time. Absolutely, it's a great upgrade to do. If you only have, in his case, he had 2 gigs, and it's like, this will make a big difference, and we can get you all set up. Don't worry about it. So he drives like 45 minutes from one of the farther stores to our office. So actually, before he even headed here, Ashley had been talking to him on the phone, and he said, she asked him, what kind of computer do you have? And so he gave her the serial number. She looked it up, and she said, I'm pretty sure your computer like maxes out at 2 gigs. And he said, well, Apple says I can get 4 or 8. So so whatever. So he comes in, and he's got the original MacBook Pro. He shows up with the original MacBook Pro. It's a Core Duo. Sure enough, it maxes out at 2 gigs. And what's worse, it wouldn't even boot properly. It boots up to like complete graphics corruption. So apparently Apple thought like adding memory to this computer would fix these graphics issues and let him upgrade. It was just like a complete waste of everybody's time. It's just like he just drove 45 minutes to get here for me to say, yeah, no, you can't. This is like just a lost cause. You need to buy a new computer. Forget it. So speaking of those times where it's like a wasted, it just, I like met with him for like 20 minutes in my office to like just reiterate, like, no, there's really nothing that we or you can do. This is done. It's like, how old are those computers? They're like 8 years old now or something like that, 9.
Yeah, I guess he's one of those users that probably doesn't really consider that the age of machines, 8 years old is an old machine, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of these things where he wanted to just buy a little more time. Like, it's going to cost you an awful lot in this computer.
Sure. And that was 32-bit, and that's part of the reason why you can't.
Exactly. It won't even run Yosemite. It'll max out, I think, at, would it even run Lion? I don't even think it'll run Lion. So it was just,
it will run Lion, but that's all it'll run.
Right. So forget it.
I had one of those.
Wow. I mean, the thing was, it's like you always try to like let them down easy, and it's like, well, this was a cutting edge computer at the time, but it was really like a stretch. It was the first MacBook Pro. It was a major leap forward for Apple, but because of the timing of things, it's it hasn't really hung in there as a viable machine. I'm just really shocked to even have it, still booting at all, still powering up.
Right. And one of the things I always say to clients when they have a machine of that vintage or something even earlier is to kind of put it in perspective is, if you gave me this machine, I wouldn't want it. And
exactly.
They're like, oh, okay.
That's a funny way to put it, though. They're like, oh, well, excuse me.
Right.
Well, of course, I say it in a nice way. So.
Of course. No, I mean, you guys talk about non-lucrative clients. I mean, I have this client that I've had for, I don't know, over a decade at this point, but we go through the same song and dance every time it's time to re-up their contract, where the owner tries to finagle a lesser cost and all this stuff. So, it's almost to the point where we make decent amount of money from them, but it's how much frustration do I want to deal with when it comes to the financial part of it? And this case was no different. This past week, we had to re-up his contract, and he's already asking and hemming and hawing and asking to split up the payment into over a period of 7 months. I'm like, then what's the point of giving you a contract if I'm just going to let you pay it out over the year? And it's just so frustrating to deal with that every year I have to deal with this guy, and I'm like, listen, do we do right by you or what? And that should be the only question here. And speaking of which, I did try and get him onto our managed services, because it would be a dream to have this guy automatically pulled from his credit card every single month, because then I wouldn't have to deal with this conversation. But he didn't do it. He wanted to negotiate the lower contract and got into a really nasty one this time about his previous rates, because we finally upped him after 7 years of grandfathering him in. So he's a pretty good negotiator. I must admit I was too nice about it over the years, but this time we stood our line and said, look, you got to be upped on your rate. You've been grandfathered in for so long, and he just threw a fit.
Wow.
And it was at the point I was like, I was weighing the cost of this argument on the phone versus how much I make on him in a year, and I almost wanted to say, you know what, man, go find somebody else. Call Joe. At that point, you
glad he didn't say Jerry there.
At that point, you just don't. I don't know. It's so frustrating. Like, you feel like you do right by them. You do good work. You helped them out. I even comped them some hours last month when something didn't go great. And you have to deal with that at the end of the day. And that's just incredibly frustrating to deal with.
Yeah, it's like the psychological side of things. It's, it's not only about like the financial side. I mean that's what kind of precipitates it, because you want to be able to make sure you're, turning a profit, or at least like not losing money on a deal. But once you kind of make that decision and you approach it with the client, if they're just putting up a fight, it's like they're clearly, what they're saying to you, like, in different words, is I don't really get the value of your services. So I totally agree. I feel at that point, like I've been getting more and more to this point lately, like where I'm willing to say to a client, like, then you don't get it, then just, then find somebody else.
Yeah. Not a good match.
Yeah. What's funny too is, so we upped his rate, but he was because of a recent project, he was about just over 10 hours over his past contract, right? So I said, you know what, I'll bill you at the old rate for that, just as a courtesy. And he asked for a discount of below even the old rate.
Oh God, screw this guy.
Come on, man. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So anyway, yeah. So that was a point of it, and that conversation just ended this afternoon, so it's fresh in my mind. But yeah, I'm getting to that grumpy point where I'm like, you know what? I don't need you. Even though I might, I'll tell him I don't need you.
Right.
I mean, I'm not advising you to walk, but maybe a little attitude readjustment might be in order here. And you might be able to do that, maybe not successfully. Well, I'm sure you could do it successfully over the phone as well. But sometimes just an email, where you kind of put it out there and you say, maybe this is the situation is become, a little bit untenable for us, and us having to negotiate our fees. This is our rate. And, we encourage you to, perhaps look for a better match.
I forgot to tell you, most of this conversation was on email. He's what I call an email tough guy. Mm-hmm. So he'll just go crazy on you via email, and then you pick up the phone and he's like, oh, hey, how's it going?
Right.
I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? But yeah, I hear what you're saying, Jerry. I mean, you just kind of put your foot down, and that's essentially what we did this afternoon. Is just enough is enough. We've really done right by you, and if you don't appreciate our work, then what can I tell you?
Yeah, I used to work for a company that had that same sort of modus operandi at the end, usually at the end of every year. And it wasn't, a lot of times it wasn't specifically addressing any one particular service as being that they found that the service was lacking, but they would look at all the big numbers. They would meet with their accountant and they go, okay, where's our biggest dollar allocations? And whether it was getting the guy to come and refill the water every week, or the coffee service, or whatever it was, they'd kind of like look at this and say, well, what can we do here? We don't need a whole case of toilet paper. We're going to cut back. And sometimes it's not even reflective of. I mean, obviously in your case, Sam, it's not reflective of your service, but it's just they look at where the bigger numbers are being spent, and they try to fine tune as best they can. So sometimes some people do it with a little bit more more finesse, but this sounds like a case where it sounds like you stood your line and that was advisable.
I'm getting better.
Yeah, it is frustrating dealing with this like question of when the client's not getting the value, and it's like they want you to be there when they need you, but then they don't want to pay later. They just. It's like, if you didn't pay me, then I'm just, you're not going to be able to call on me in the future. If you or if you pay me, if you refuse to pay me what I charge, these are like, these are rates that I've spent a lot of time, figuring out. Like, I'm not just making up numbers. It's like this is the cost of doing business. This is like what I need to live and to operate my consultancy. And if you want my consultancy to be here when you call me, then you need to pay my rates, or I'm going to go away, and then you're going to have to call somebody else. So that's kind of like, I think what puts me in that mindset to be able to say to somebody, like, you can just call somebody else if you don't get it, because you're going to, if I agreed to accept what you want to pay me, then you're going to have to call somebody else when I go out of business. So.
Right. There's a classic line in Goodfellas, which I won't repeat on air, but if any of you are Goodfellas fans, it's basically, F you, pay me. So I mean, that's the way I feel at times. It's like that's all you can say at that point. Anyway, I won't belabor the point, but safe to say that I think they're going to pay up, and we're going to keep them as a client. But this time we put them in line, and I'm kind of proud of that.
earlier in the podcast, you were talking about, just seeing the unusual events of, just naming your file server with the name file in it. So I messaged both of you guys earlier in the week about this. So actually, the end of last week, I was at a client site, and we were just simply taking their Apple Airport Extreme out of service because they were using Grand Central as their new VoIP service for virtual phones, and so they needed to get one of the recommended routers that the service so that they could get quality of service for VoIP and fine tune the router. And you obviously can't do that with an Airport Extreme. So I installed an ASUS router for them that was recommended, and we did some port forwarding. And just in terms of me transferring the settings from the previous Airport Extreme, I noticed that he had mapped out static IP addresses to all his machines on the LAN. And then I noticed that there was a separate MAC address with an identical IP address. And it said, and the notation was like Mac Pro Wi-Fi. And I said, you've got two MAC addresses mapped to the same IP address. One's WAN and one's one's LAN and one's Wi-Fi. What are you doing? Why are you doing that? And he said, "Oh, I got on the phone with server support, and somebody told me that this would be a good way for me to do it, because if I unplugged and I just went to Wi-Fi and went back and forth from Wi-Fi to Ethernet, I wouldn't lose my IP address." And I'm like, huh, okay. I said, I have a couple of colleagues I'd like to run this by, but I've never heard of this before, and my gut feeling tells me that this is like so wrong. It's absolutely ridiculous. But you think you've seen it all, and then you see something like that. So
yeah, I remember when you sent that message to us, and I was like, wait, let me read that again. I was like, did the client really just tell him that? And I'm really seriously hoping that no one did give him that advice. I mean, I can't think of any good reason, to be honest with you. I mean, unless I'm missing something, but that doesn't seem like a good practice at all.
Oh, it's a terrible idea, though, because I mean, I've been tempted to like, I don't know, do something similar for whatever reason, in thinking like, well, if the Ethernet, gets yanked out or something, then that's like a failover to Wi-Fi. But I mean, in practice, it wouldn't work that way, because you can't have both interfaces connected using the same IP address at the same time. So you'd have to have Wi-Fi only turned on if Ethernet gets unplugged. But you'd have to script that or something, I guess, to really make it like a true failover. But it seems like it's asking for trouble, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he was complaining that he was having trouble using back to my Mac, and I said, well, we can try to port forward that, and your mileage will vary of whether it works with this ASUS router or not, but I'll do all the port forwarding for back to my Mac. And he said, yeah, some machines show up and then they disappear, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that this is why that's happening for you. But it's remarkable it was even working for him at all. Because, of course, the Apple products they can run, simultaneously on Wi-Fi and Ethernet, and you just set the service order. But it won't increase your bandwidth, but you can have both connections live at the same time,
right? As
we frequently do. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough when a client comes back from the Apple Store with some kind of bit of knowledge they've gained, knowledge in quotes, because, it's like we've talked about this in the past, but they hear it from a bona fide genius. It's like they kind of just they assign some higher value to like this wisdom that they're getting from the Apple Store. And again, not to bash Apple, but I really actually understand where they're coming from. I mean, they have like a limit of very few minutes, that they are interacting with a client. They have maybe like 10 or 15 minutes with a client, and they're giving them some advice that may be like really specifically valid in a certain way, but the people in the Apple Store just don't have the same level of expertise, of experience in the field with clients. So I don't know, things that may work in a really controlled environment, or things that they don't, they can't really see the environment. that's where this advice is coming from. But the client then thinks like, well, that's what the Apple store told me. That's what Apple told me, and we're like this sort of like affiliate, this like loose connection with Apple. So they're coming to us like, like, are you sure are you sure you know better? Because the Apple store told me this, like this, they really think it's like really true,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We've all been there. Yeah. I mentioned a client who was sitting at the Genius Bar when they still had the bar, and he was asking for where he could get encrypted drives, how to make encrypted drives. So the Genius was somewhat lost to sort of give him some solid advice, and of course my conversation with him didn't go that deep, but of course you can buy third-party commercial drives that are already pre-encrypted like IronKey. And so as I walked over, I just happened to walk in, and the client had his back to me, and the Genius saw me, and he said, "Oh, let's ask our Apple consultant here." And as soon as my client turned around, I looked at his face, and he almost rolled his eyes, like, "Oh, here's this joker again." And he's like, "Yeah, do you know of any encrypted drive? Can you buy an encrypted drive?" I said, "Well, sure you can. You can buy an IronKey," and I believe, Mr. Customer, we talked about that when I was on site.
Wow. So he was there getting a second opinion.
He was there, getting, I told you, getting the opinion from Steve Jobs on high.
Right.
So, yeah. So, and he left, and, I don't think we parted. It wasn't he didn't huff out, but, it wasn't like, he shook my hand and said goodbye. So it's, that happens though, Joe. The Apple Store and that word becomes the trusted source, and you become this sort of like rogue third-party opinion for a lot of this, a lot of advice for customers.
I used to work even harder at trying to dispel that and be really diplomatic about it and be like, because I always want to do the right thing by the client, whatever it means for me. I want to make sure that they don't get in a spot where their data is at risk or whatever. And I used to work a lot harder at that, and I just have the attitude more so lately where it's like, all right, whatever. If that's what you believe, screw it. I mean, I'm not gonna go out of my way to try to make that situation right. I have nothing to gain from it. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting more. It sounds like I'm getting more cynical, but
it's because you're older,
I guess. Yeah, yeah, that's frustrating though.
So as we start to arc down our conversation for this evening, I have a little bit of follow-up. I had been really, really puzzled the last couple of weeks by this rogue email that I had sent to a client while I was careening down the highway. And I mentioned that I was using Siri. I actually wasn't using Siri. I was using voice dictation. And in this email to my client, I got a follow-up from his superior saying, geez, it's too bad that you sent him that email, or thank you for sending them an email. By the way, why did you tell him that he was lying? And so, of course, I went back and I reviewed it, and it said, it said, you lie. So I'm like, where did that come from? So it happened again. Not, and obviously I caught it this time. But it's when I'm using voice dictation and I want to have a new paragraph, I'll say new line, and it'll space me down 2 lines. And so new line translates into you lie. So if it doesn't hear it exactly, if you say new line, you won't get any text at all. It'll move down a new line. So it is one of the commands that it understands, but if it mishears it, it comes out as you lie. So
you can say new paragraph, then it's that's 2 lines.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, it does.
It hasn't been working for me.
Really?
Uh-oh. I'll have to have the dictation
because I've been asking clients for new parakeets, and that's been confusing. So
well done, Jerry.
Thank you.
Good.
Testing Siri, period. New paragraph. This is a new paragraph, period.
Are you using Siri?
This is great. It says testing Siri, period, and then there's a line break, and then there's another line break, and then it says this is a, and then there's another blank line, and then it says
new
period. Yeah. So it actually heard new paragraph twice. But it's funny because you can't say this is a new paragraph because then it'll just make a new paragraph.
Yeah.
All right, I'll have to try that. Thank you, Joe.
That works. I mean, it's either that or parakeet. I think you're safer to talk about a parakeet than that somebody's lying. So at least there's that.
Accuse them of lying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Given the two, right? The parakeet is a safe bet. Yeah.
Well, probably, depending on what the parakeet is doing or saying, or yeah.
It ends up being a Monty Python skit at that point.
Right. Exactly.
The parakeet's dead. And the other little bit of follow-up I had been talking about on our last show, how with using Watchmen, which we love, forwarding those Watchmen issues to Zendesk and using Zendesk and then having to respond to those tickets. And sometimes those client tickets end up in their spam folder. But that aside, I was looking for a way to streamline that. And just very nicely, I made some pretty streamlined text expander fill-in snippets to pretty much address most of the cases that come through the Zendesk, and most of them are time machine issues where the time machine hasn't backed up for 7 days. And so at least you feel like you got the email off your shoulder, you've notified the client, and they may be on vacation, but I just found that I could expedite those responding to those requests or those Zendesk tickets that came in from Watchmen a little bit faster. So that worked out really nicely. So thank you, Text Expander.
Nice.
I know.
Yeah. Definitely a good tip. I had a similar situation with without using Zendesk, but with Watchmen sent me an alert saying, such and such client has not backed up in over 7 days, and I knew this client had a desktop hard drive just plugged into their iMac in their store, and so I sent her an email real quick saying, hey, it looks like you're not backing up, and I suspect maybe the drive is just like unplugged or needs to be turned off and turned back on or something like that. So I explained that in the email, just like a 2-line email. Didn't hear back, and then like 3 days later she wrote me an email saying, hey, I'm getting an error about I haven't backed up in 10 days. What do I do? And I'm like, I just wrote you a thing like, here's my suggestion, try just check for the cable and check this and that. And then she said, she wrote me back saying, well, I didn't hear back from you yesterday, so I went to the Apple store, it's all set. And I'm like, I checked Watchmen, and no, it's not all set. You're not backing up still. I don't know what Apple did, but I mean, they didn't have your hard drive in front of them. So that's...
They told her she needed more memory.
Right. I think they sold her a mail server. So then of course I helped her, but it was the same situation where it's like they just, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't even a Zendesk thing. She didn't get my email at first, and then the second email didn't come fast enough, and but it was again a positive for Watchmen because I was able to check and know without having to like remote into her machine. I knew that nope, she still was not backing up, so I knew that the issue was unresolved. So it was a really nice. Again, it just made me like really just appreciate the dashboard, just being able to go in and see what the status was right then.
For sure. So thank you all for coming to live chat. So we broadcast now live the first Tuesday of every month, usually beginning around 8:15, and so we thank all the people who joined in the live chat. It was great to see all our old friends again.
Yeah, and given our broadcasting schedule, Jerry, you might want to schedule your backups to occur at after 9:30, exactly, or Wednesday nights. But yeah, agreed. Thank you all for showing up, and again, we encourage everybody to check out the live show every month, first Tuesday of every month at 8:30 or 8:15 ish. Eastern time in the evening, and check for the new episodes are posted weekly on Tuesdays, so subscribe at commandcontrolpower.com, and see you again next week.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I